how's it going, everybody? I'm Paulie. So for a while, I've always had this struggle to figure out a way to illustrate my faith in Christianity in an interesting and meaningful way to me. I have lots and lots of ideas of pieces in my mind that I'd like to execute, but just oftentimes feel like I'm not confident in my skill to execute them. And I really appreciate meaning in my pieces. And that's not to say that I don't appreciate cool pieces or illustrations, but I always love hearing the story behind an artist's work, right? I always love hearing the meaning behind an artwork or an art piece. Whether it was sharing the process of how they created the image, the reason why they were inspired to create what they created, or even the narrative that they're putting within their image. Story and meaning has always been very intriguing for me whenever I consume art or I'm making art. So with this struggle weighing heavily on my mind, I would constantly think to myself, how could I use the powerful, vivid images I find all over the Bible and meet the world where they're at and share the gospel with them whilst avoiding the very real temptation to fall into the same iconography and the fascinations that they illustrate. So with all of this on my mind, I want to tell you of a time where I overcame this struggle. So one day, just last summer, I was invited to be a part of this local exhibition and publication in which, several other artists within my area were able to draw a illustration to be a part of this collaborative effort. And so I was so enthused. I was ecstatic to be a part of this little experiment or slash the show. So with the invitation, there was a prompt to the artwork that we were all going to create, and the prompt was subliminal city. And so with the invitation, I gladly accepted, and I saw my opportunity to try and, share the gospel through this little prompt. So with this invitation also, we were given a few definitions for the keywords that were within the prompt, to get the juices flowing. So the definitions they gave us were of liminal spaces and subliminal. So liminal spaces are transitional or transformative spaces, and such places are often associated with a forlorn atmosphere, a disconnection from the concept of reality, and a fluid or sometimes neglected aesthetic. They are the waiting areas between one point in time and space and the next. And subliminal is existing or operating below the threshold of consciousness, being or employing stimuli insufficiently intense to produce a discrete sensation, but often being or designed to be intense enough to influence the mental processes or the behavior of the individual. And so liminal spaces being just an in-between space from one place to get to the other, oftentimes like a bridge or a corridor, a hallway, whatever else, one space that's in between, the space in between point A and point B. And then subliminal, you hear it all the time. Subliminal messages, things that are supposed to seep into the back of your mind rather than be overtly in your face kind of thing. And with the prompt also, I was thinking of, within subliminal, subliminal and everything like that, there's also sublime. And I believe sublime is to basically feel like a state of just, comfort and joy. So I'll bake that into the concept as well. And so with these words and working off of these concepts, I immediately took to my sketchbook to try and figure out what I'd want to do for my illustration. So when I first read Subliminal City, I first was transported to a more cyberpunkish world / futuristic landscape. And with most media depictions of our futuristic cities, they're pretty dystopian in nature. And so I thought, well, maybe I could have a character spray painted a cryptic message left for passerbys to decipher for themselves, maybe. Just checking the subliminal box with the graffiti. And I also thought, hey, maybe the artist could be in a sublime state as well. Maybe this is a form of meditation or catharsis. But I didn't really want to send a message of vandalism being a form of therapy. So I moved on from that idea. So I moved from it and thought more about cities and liminal spaces you can encounter there. Whenever I think of cities, I always think of New York City, with all of its touristy destinations, bright lights, and beautiful pockets of parks. My mind stayed on the parks and different trees you might find there within the park, right? So I looked at images of Central Park and started to ideate off of that. I think back on when I would go through parks with my time in New York City and just see how, there's this beautiful respite of greenery and just peace and calm. And then on the other side, it's just a bustling, busy city, big old skyscrapers still envelop around you with, cars still going by and everything like that. So I thought of, that liminal space in between, one destination getting to the next. There's that green patch that, you can stop and chill at before you have to go to work or whatever else. So these are concepts that my mind was thinking of when ideating for this illustration. And so with all of this conceptualized, I took to my piece of paper and I just started sketching out what I had there in my sketchbook. So with this tree, I thought of subliminally putting pictorial symbols of Christ within the tree itself. So I thought about Christ and his words. I think about him a lot, being one of his followers. But a few symbols, elements, and different phrases he spoke came to mind when I was putting together this concept. So he mentions in Matthew 7, verses 13 through 14, how wide and broad is the gate towards destruction, but straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leadeth to life. And then in another passage found in John 14:6, Jesus mentions how he's the way, the truth, and the life. And so basically straight is the gate, straight is the information, and that is the gospel, and narrow is the way in which, leads to Christ. There's no one like Christ. Christ and his mission is one of a kind. It's one of the stories and one of the facts of history that, is just unparalleled. There's no other story like Jesus's. So I thought of this straight little path that leads to this tree that resembles Jesus. So right here, you'll see me figuring out how I'll try and ink the tree. I was doing some studies of different trees and how, using line to inform the form of the tree, as well as give it directionality, using line to not only describe form and shadow and light, but also show some direction and movement and motion and energy, some dynamicism within the piece, without just having it plainly drawn any kind of way, just having the lines give motion and movement within the piece. One of the more obvious shapes that this tree was going to take was that of a cross, or at least something that resembles a cross, that T kind of symbol. I also wanted to have the tree branches kind of have holes in them where you would assume hands and feet would be. Obviously, just hearkening back to Christ in his crucifixion and what he did. Just baking in the gospel in there. With Christ's crucifixion being one of the surest facts of history, as well as one of the 3 bits of information in which we rest our Christianity on, or our faith in Christianity on, which is the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. I also added a cornerstone in there because Jesus talks about how he's the cornerstone a bunch. And so, I have all these different symbols just baked together within the image. I looked at a few artists for this project as well. That being one of my favorite comic book artists, Daniel Warren Johnson. So I looked at mostly Daniel Warren Johnson and just how much energy and motion that he has within his brushwork. His artwork is insane, and I definitely recommend just checking out his work. He has some beautiful artwork. Love how much energy is in his work. And so I wanted to replicate that within this little image, although it's a very very centered composition and not much action going on. I still wanted to convey movement within the branches and the leaves. The leaves being with the leaves supposed to be looking like leaves, but also give that impression that it's like burning or like it's fire, like it's in the motion of fire, given that impression that it's like the burning bush. And so I mostly inked this with the regular, some Tombow brush pens, both the Fudosake, just the fine liner brush pens. I think I used a bigger Tombow brush pen to try and fill in the darks of the image. I used all sorts of different inks and ink utensils to try and get the background as dark as I could. I used a bunch of hatching for the ground to try and separate and give the ground some texture, the grass some texture, leave some spots, blank and silent, and then give some other pieces of the illustration a lot of voice and volume. If you haven't noticed it as well, I have the top of the branch kind of spiral into like a crown of thorns as well. So just trying to bring this illustration to life through line and gesture, even giving this tree some gesture and have it all knotted a certain way, just to make the image as interesting as possible, to have you really take focus on Christ and his example and what he's done for us on the cross. I have in the background also a very, very, very wide gate with some serpentine imagery happening on that gate as well, just showing the juxtaposition between the straight way that leads to Jesus and the wide way that leads to destruction. I wanted to include the broad aspect as well, with like the huge skyscrapers just representing many towers of Babel, but also how skyscrapers hold a lot of people, and so a lot of people unfortunately miss the straight gate, or they deny the straight way. And so just kind of using that imagery there. So yeah, that's what I illustrated for this concept of a subliminal city. And I call this piece Sanctuary because this could be a little respite for people to reflect on Christ's work, not to worship the tree at all, but to just be reminded of what Christ did for us. So yeah, that's this image. And so with that, I sent the illustration back to the local comic shop. Unfortunately, I missed the gallery show, but it looked like it was a blast. You can check out the gallery show in the description, the pieces that were involved in the showing. Obviously, I don't, condone or stand behind all the pieces of artwork and their messaging, but, I'm just really appreciative that everybody put in their hard work and just were able to be a part of this really cool experience. So with this experience, I'm eternally grateful for it because I was pushed outside of my comfort zone a bit, and I was challenged with an interesting prompt whilst being able to tie in my faith in a not so subtle but subtle way, so yeah, if you want to check out another video that I did that kind of tackles the same issue, in which I try to show my faith in a pictorial form, then click this video right here, in which I did 2 paintings illustrating how the Holy Spirit is involved in my faith walk. Catch you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Catch you later. God bless.